Which Chicago Bears should you be buying and selling in your dynasty leagues? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. I am your host, Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can check her out on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, today we are talking about the Chicago Bears, and let's just jump right into it. Who is the one player you are buying this offseason on the Bears?
Marcus, I don't like you pigeonholing me into picking one player, because
you have to pick one, though.
If I've learned anything in my research for this podcast, it is that apparently I want to buy all the Bears. Is that like build a bear? I want to buy a bear.
Build the Bears.
Buy a bear. I've realized that like picking one player feels very much like a challenge. And I think that's a true compliment to what this organization has done just in the last offseason, honestly. But since I have to pick one, I am going to go with the obvious choice. But because I want to shout a couple of stats out that it absolutely blew my mind. That's right. I'm buying Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who really, really hard not to like at this point, right? Like fifth among all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game last year. Did it all while not being overly productive as a passer. And just as a testament to how much this guy ran and the explosive plays he was able to make. He was one of just 17 players in the entire NFL to exceed 1,000 rushing yards. The only quarterback to do it, 6th in rush yards per game among all players. He had one more touchdown, 109 more rushing yards than Najee Harris, a designated running back.
Yep.
Like, absolutely insane. Tied for the second most runs of 20 or more yards. Like, explosion for days. And it feels very much like the Jalen Hurts breakout of 2022. Like, what we've seen time and time again, and this feels like it's like a trend. I feel like GMs are kind of catching on to the secret to developing quarterbacks as a passer, and big shock, it's getting talent at the receiver position and getting them actual capable weapons. We saw it with Josh Allen. They upgrade to Stephon Diggs. Suddenly he has a true wide receiver one, and he's a great passer. Jalen Hurts, acquire him a stud in AJ Brown. Boom, develops as a passer. I do think that DJ Moore is a wide receiver who, on his own might not be my favorite player for fantasy. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But I do think that he is a true wide receiver one that definitely safens the floor of his quarterback. And I think we're going to see a similar move forward for, Justin Fields for this entire offense this year.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think he's the biggest buy for this team. One of the reasons for me why I'm buying him is the price. Like I jumped on to Dynasty League Football today to look at the startup ADP, and I was shocked to learn that Justin Fields wasn't a top 5 Dynasty quarterback in startup ADP. He's not even 6. He's going right now as QB 7, behind, obviously Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. And it's like, he's going to put up more fantasy points than Justin Herbert every year. He's going to outscore Joe Burrow every year. I know those guys are better on the field quarterbacks, but what we care about is rushing yards, right? And we care about how that provides us a safe floor. You mentioned all the recent examples of quarterbacks that were only runners that became, better passers as they got later in their career. Look no further than Josh Allen. Even Lamar Jackson has improved a lot since early in his career. This is just kind of the trajectory that happens. And with Chicago adding so much talent to that receiving core and to the offensive line this offseason, how is he not a buy?
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be sort of that last buy window, though,
Yeah.
for Justin Fields, because I do think if he takes a step forward as a passer, that puts him in this sort of like untouchable category. Like Jalen Hurts, really hard to trade for right now because
Yes.
he kind of broke through that ceiling. Justin Fields, similarly, only 24 years old. And I think we'd all argue like the ceiling's very much untapped because he provided a lot of that production, as we said, not really producing a ton as a passer. Now, a couple things I want to point out too that just have me like overall encouraged, right? One thing that I think, just generally speaking, it has maybe not like scared some people off, but maybe raised some concerns for Justin Fields is like the sacks, right? And it took 55 sacks in the last year. Um, not not great. You
Mhm.
don't want to see your quarterback getting sacked, and it can be an indicative stat of, you know, quarterback play as well as offensive line. But wanted to point out, because I've heard so much conjecture about this, that when we actually look at the percentage of dropbacks that like he's responsible for a pressure, which is a signature PFF stat,
Mhm.
they break down pressure responsibility by position. it, we actually see Justin Fields ranking behind Jalen Hurts, just ahead of like Kenny Pickett, Patrick Mahomes, like it, well behind Deshaun Watson,
Yep.
Lamar
Yep.
Jackson, Brock Purdy in the percentage of pressures that he himself is responsible for, either maybe via, holding on to the ball too long, misreading, going into like I don't think that we can hold these sacks against him. They have made moves to improve the offensive line here. I just think that we should be encouraged by all the stats we've seen. And um, I mean, Justin Fields, even from when you look at his splits between when he's being pressured and when he is not, you do see a nice jump in production when he
Mhm.
is not being pressured, which it's really hard to gauge quarterback, you know, processing it when they are facing pressure. Like there are some quarterbacks that like can do it and be unfazed, like a Patrick Mahomes. But if you want to get a true gauge on how quarterbacks are playing the field, you have to look at what they're doing when they're not pressured. And again, you see a nice jump in production. It's not elite, but again, I mean, he was throwing to like Dante Pettis last
Yep.
year. So I'm going to give him the
A
benefit of the
lot.
doubt now that we have DJ Moore in the mix.
Couple trades really quickly in super flex leagues involving Justin Fields. Justin Fields for Matt Stafford in the 102.
Give me Justin Fields.
Yeah, so that's basically, I think, for the most part, Anthony Richardson is the number one quarterback that's being drafted in super flex leagues. Uh,
Okay, so I guess it might depend. Would you prefer a Matthew Stafford plus Anthony Richardson, or because I guess theoretically it could be Anthony Richardson or it could be Bijan. Does that change the equation at all?
oh, it's a good point. You're saying if Richardson goes first in a super flex league ahead of Bijan, yeah, I think if I agree. If it's Bijan, I'm taking Bijan over Fields. But if it's Richardson, I'm taking the Field side. Good, that's a good point there. But failed to mention that. Next one. This one's really interesting. Justin Fields for Najee Harris, 205, and then a first and second round pick next year's draft.
um, and this is super flex.
Super flex. These are all super flex trades.
Oh man, Marcus, that's
That's a
definitely hard.
lot.
I think there's a lot to unpack there. I definitely think it depends on sort of uh,
What the other team looks like where do you
what like
project that pick to
yeah,
be?
like is that a top 5 pick? Is and like
Mid
again,
first.
anything can happen. So when you're projecting these picks, like let's be clear, you do not know, like every single year there are surprise teams just like the NFL that come out and absolutely crush it and it finish in first out of nowhere. But like generally speaking, is it a team that looks like they're ready to contend, or is this looking like it could be
Yeah.
potential top 3 pick? That's probably the tiebreaker that I'd use there. Um, I'm leaning at this point, if we're assuming it's a mid to late
Let's say
round
7.
pick, yeah, I'd probably lean the Najee plus pick
Yeah,
side.
I would agree. Last one. Justin Fields and Elijah Moore for Lamar Jackson and Odell Beckham. Little Ravens stack there. I'll take Lamar.
I think I will as well.
But to be honest, just by looking at Dynasty League football, not a lot of trades for Justin Fields. So go see if you can make one and then report back to us. We want to know what it takes to acquire Justin Fields in your Superflex Dynasty leagues. Okay, let's talk about the player that we want to sell from the Chicago Bears. There aren't many, but there is one that kind of stands out, at least to me. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I mean, right now, I'd would bet on the Nuggets to win the NBA championship. I think they are by far the best team left, but that's just me.
Gee, I wonder who's going to win that NBA Finals MVP. I don't know.
Yes, a guy named Jokic. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Matt and Ryan will be back on Tuesday and Wednesday, I believe, to do the Lions and the Packers. And then Kate, you and I breaking down the Vikings later in the week. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. Okay, let's talk about our Dynasty sell for the Bears because I got a feeling you and I have the same name. Who do you got?
DJ Moore.
Yep, it's DJ Moore.
I hinted at it earlier, so I'm sorry if I gave away the farm here. But again, folks, we do not share our pre-show analysis here because we want it to be in the moment, and we don't want to give you guys any shortage of takes here. But definitely DJ Moore for me. I gushed for about 45 minutes on Justin Fields. Let's give you the field here, Marcus, on DJ Moore, and I'm going to agree with anything you have to say.
DJ Moore is one of my favorite players in the league. Like I love his game. I love how he plays. I love how consistent he has been. I mean, in 2019, 2020, and 2021, he had exactly 1,200 yards or 1,215 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like the model of consistency every single year. Last year had a spike in touchdowns, actually scored 7. It's just, we're going into year 6 now. It's a different scenery, right? It's going to be a team that doesn't throw the ball as much as he's used to. Plus, Chicago just has a lot of weapons now, right? It's DJ Moore and Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney and Velus Jones and Tyler Scott and Cole Kmet and all these running backs they have, plus Justin Fields' legs. I still think DJ Moore can get to 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, but he's just not the dynasty asset that he was 2 years ago when he was 24 and putting up these numbers. I would flip him for some players that are going around him, like in the same range, like Jordan Addison. I like more right now. Terry McLaurin, I like more now. I just think that we've probably have seen his zenith of his career so far.
Oh, look at you. Big words. Okay. Yeah, I think here's for me, like DJ Moore, I don't think there's a better example in the NFL right now. Like we always talk about there are fantasy players, there are players that are good for fantasy that aren't necessarily great football players, right? But you have to play the game. You have to play to the scoring settings. You have to manipulate those things. And sometimes that produces fantasy assets that aren't necessarily the best players on the field. And that's where the disconnect between fantasy and real life happens. I do think there's a disconnect between actual skill set with DJ Moore and that translating to fantasy production.
I would agree. Yes.
Like since he was drafted back in 2018, like generally speaking, the floor and the overall production, the ceiling for DJ Moore, relatively like underwhelming. Just finished 6% of his games in the top 5. Like the ceiling's not overly high to comp. Like
he's
Allen
a wide receiver
Robinson,
too. Right.
Allen Robinson has finished, with 7% of his games in the top 5. Allen Robinson has finished with more, with a higher percentage of games in the top 5 than DJ Moore. Like T. Higgins, for example, if we're making sort of comps, 15% of his games in the top 5. DJ Moore, even when we're looking at top 12 production, right? Wide receiver 1, 18.75% of his games as a wide receiver 1. Not great. Like, even when we're comparing him to, again, T. Higgins, 21.5%. Like, when you go down the list, the majority of DJ Moore's production has come as a wide receiver 4 or worse, 47.5% of his games. And again, when we, compare to the elites, yeah, that's not going to stack up, but like it feels like we pay this premium for DJ Moore based on the fact that he is a good NFL wide receiver,
Like a
and
legitimately good player in the NFL.
he is
Yes.
a legitimately good player. But again, that is one of those moments where we have to step back and say, okay, that does not always
Yep.
translate to fantasy greatness. And though I think DJ Moore is great for Justin Fields and
It's going to
his
help that
ceilings,
offense
yes,
dramatically, right?
absolutely. Like, he's not a player that is a ceiling player. And to be honest, like, the floor is not high enough for me to want to pay that price. He is aging. It's just, I feel like this is a good moment to sell DJ Moore because of this hype, because of
Yep.
this change in scenery. If people are excited for what he could do, in tandem with Justin Fields, I'm moving on as quickly as possible.
What I would like to do if I'm going to sell him is flip him for a receiver who is a little bit younger, who's maybe a little bit less proven. For example, I've seen a couple trades where it's DJ Moore for Christian Watson. I would take the Watson side, right?
Absolutely.
Or if it's, I mean, I mentioned Jordan Addison. That's a guy that I would be targeting. And maybe you could get a rookie draft pick where you're in position to draft him. That's appealing. I'm going to run through some trades really quickly. And there's been a ton of them over the last few weeks. Justin Fields for the 108 in the super flex. These are all super flex leagues, by the way.
DJ Moore,
Yes.
you mean? Okay.
Yeah. DJ
Um,
Moore for, yeah, sorry. DJ Moore for 108 in a super flex league. Yes.
yeah, I'll take the 108.
Okay. 111 for DJ Moore.
I'll take the 111.
112 for DJ Moore.
I'll take the 112.
Okay. 203.
Might be pushing it.
Yeah.
That's pushing
And that's kind of the way I feel. Like once we get to the second round, it's pushing it a little bit. But that's not the trade that I want to make if I'm selling DJ Moore. It's not for a rookie pick. It's for an already in the NFL player that's young, right? Who you're hoping can maybe take the next step. I think
it.
that's probably where you're going to get the most value.
This is one of my favorite recent trades for DJ Moore. DJ Moore and 200 blind bidding dollars. I have to assume that that's probably the majority of your fab for
If
the
not
year
all of. Yeah.
for Drake London.
Yeah. Give me Drake London in that
Give
one.
me
Right.
Drake London.
Right.
Like, that's a player. Just last week we talked about his potential to, like, if we were going to pin any of these, mid-tier wide receivers to potentially be top 5 dynasty assets next year, it's going to be Drake London. Drake London's ceiling exponentially higher than
Correct.
DJ Moore, and I do think his floor is pretty much similar.
Oh, I think Drake London has a higher floor, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just fewer targets in that passing game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about our dynasty hold to the Chicago Bears next. All right, Kate, to finish up the show, who is the one player that you're going to hold on to just to see where the value ends up?
I'm probably going to, like, this feels just gross, but I'm probably just going to hold Chase Claypool. Like, that's the one I have a lot of buys. Like, I think Cole Kmet, very interesting buy just because his it feels like the temperature is cooling off a bit on Cole Kmet. So, like, he kind of feels like a buy for me. Khalil Herbert kind of feel like all of these guys feel like buys, except Chase Claypool. The reason he's a hold is because I don't think anybody's buying, right? Like, there's not a market for Chase Claypool right now. But when we consider, the prospect, love Chase Claypool, his athleticism and what he can do at his size, pretty incredible. Hasn't translated to the field at this point. If you think this passing offense is going to take a step forward, great. Um, like, let's not forget the Bears traded the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool. Like, I do think that might buy him a little bit of time in patience with this organization, just given the investment and That's all I got on Chase Claypool. Not
Good.
excited about it, but
Yeah, I get it. Wide receiver 77. You if you've held him this long, you might as well hold out one more year to see if things click with a full off season. We'll see.
yep.
The guy for me is Khalil Herbert. I'm actually in a dynasty league last night where I was offered Khalil Herbert in a trade, and I didn't say yes, partly because the rosters are so small, 12-man rosters, which is so much fun. And it's just like, how much conviction do I have that he's going to be a RB2 this year with the addition of Deontay Foreman, with the drafting of Roschon Johnson, with Justin Fields eating into so much of the rushing production? I don't know. But he's also somebody I don't really want to sell either, because whenever he's got an opportunity, okay, he's been awesome, right? And if you look at the competition, it's Deontay Foreman on a 1-year deal, and a day 3 pick in Roschon Johnson, who we liked a lot, but again, it's just a day 3 pick. So I think Herbert's the one guy that I'm willing to just let it ride, and let's see what it looks like after 6 weeks of the season.
You're wrong. You're wrong. Khalil Herbert, I get it. Deontay Foreman, great. Still last year, breakout season, 914 rushing yards, average 4.5 yards per carry, big whoop, 9 targets, big whoop.
Yep.
I'm not discounting Khalil Herbert, a young running back, for an age 27 guy who had one good season with the Panthers. Khalil Herbert, I get it. And Roschon Johnson added to that offense. One of my favorite running backs out
we
of
love
this class.
Roschon.
But let's just a snippet of Khalil Herbert's production: 5.7 yards per attempt, first among running backs, 3.67 yards after contact per attempt, third among running backs, 22.5% missed forced tackle rate. That's 10th among running backs. 17% of his runs went for 10 or more yards. That is the second highest rate in the NFL. Give me Khalil Herbert, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
And we've seen Kate, like whenever he's got a chance to start, he's been awesome. 3 starts in his career. I'll give you the numbers right here. Against Green Bay, 19 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, 2 for 15 in the receiving game. Against Tampa Bay, 18 for 100, 5 for 33 in the receiving game. And then last year against the Giants, 19 for 77, 1 for 24. Like, that game's not amazing, but you're still getting double-digit fantasy points. He's been really good whenever he's played. Now, he's dealt with some injuries. And he's a day 3 pick, but he's hung around this long, and it seems like he is going to start. I want to at least see it for a couple weeks before I decide to make any type of move.
That's fair. I know this wasn't even this. I had to argue with you on Khalil
That's fine.
Herbert.
We haven't really argued at all. We haven't argued at all.
Yeah.
I am also just a little bit intrigued by Velus Jones, just because he was somebody that they drafted in the 3rd round last year. I think he can play in the slot, and I think he's really good with the ball in his hands. I'm not saying I'm going out and buying him. He's probably available in most of your dynasty leagues right now, but somebody who I am keeping an eye on, because Chase Claypool going into the final year of his contract, Darnell Mooney going into the final year of his contract. And we know that Velus Jones has been productive whenever he's been on the field. So keep an eye on him. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms. Go check out Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Matt and Ryan will be back on Tuesday and Wednesday to continue our preview of the NFC North, and we'll see you guys right back here on Thursday.